What is going on, everybody, and welcome to a special Monday night edition of Live Before Lock, NHL style. I am your sombrero-wearing host, Josh Harris. Joining me, as always, is my French toast-loving, Mortal Kombat-watching barista. You're not a barista, but Slim Cliffy. How you doing today?
I could be your barista if you ask me nicely. We're not celebrating Cinco de Mayo here today, though I do really appreciate the colors of your hat. You decided to go the multicolored route, so good on that. Didn't just go with the plain beige or whatever. Doing good. Just doing some work this afternoon. Was watching the Buffalo-Florida game. Buffalo, I don't know if Buffalo didn't look that great or if Florida played really well. Sometimes it's a pretty fine line between those two things, but I guess that's what makes Florida such a frustrating team is like there are games they do play games against good teams where they can look pretty much dominant at times. And then there are other games where, they look like a bottom 10 team in the league. I think that kind of inconsistency showing in their final point standings, but still got there. I think Verhaeghe got the empty net goal, so he's probably still close to a 35-40 goal pace. That was a pretty good game. But we have games to talk about tonight, 6 of them, in fact. DFS sites were kind enough to have the game starting at 6 o'clock, or the slate starting at 6 o'clock Eastern. I don't know why they decided to do that. That's pretty unlike them. Usually, sometimes FanDuel will do that. DraftKings usually rarely includes that early game, because sometimes like Vegas will have like an early game on a Saturday, like it'll start at 6 o'clock Eastern, or if it's a holiday like today, they'll have it at 6 o'clock Eastern. Not sure why DK finally decided to include it, but we get one extra game to talk about. I'm not going to complain about that.
They could have just started the main slate at 4 o'clock since the games are ending at 8 today with all these games and have like a 9-game slate. And just out of curiosity, some of you may be wondering why I'm wearing a sombrero. It's a big hat. It's funny. No, I lost the bet to someone in Discord. I said if Martin Jones is ever an optimal goalie, I will wear a sombrero on stream. I lost that bet a while ago, but what better day to do it than today after Seattle swept their road trip. Seattle got 2 shutouts for Martin Jones, and he's on the slate today. So, viva la raza, boys and girls. We'll get into this slate. I don't know. I'm not Eddie Guerrero.
I think Conan used to say that in WCW in the mid to late 90s. Been a while since I heard that.
Eddie Guerrero. But before we get into the slate, give us a like and subscribe so you keep up with all of our shows, DFS offers, giveaways, and much more. Slam that like button for the sombrero. Look how, I am copyright infringing Turd Ferguson. Sue me, Turd. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Don't forget, almost all of our content is available in podcast form, except for live before locks. Obviously, there isn't a shelf life there. Help us out by leaving a 5-star review. Shout out to our sponsor, Prize Picks. We will have a nice offer for you a bit later in the show, but let's get into this slate, shall we? Dallas Stars with a 2.9 total. Heading into Vegas, the Golden Knights have a 3 total. Jake Ottinger, Logan Thompson probable. Have not seen any confirms yet, but I guess we will find out in under a half an hour on the air. Rupe Hintz not on the trip, still out, so Tyler Seguin still up on the top line. Mark Stone is out, despite what the lineup builder may tell you. We're having some coding issues there. It will be resolved shortly. Who knows what Vegas is going to do with their lines? I know they skated this morning, but I don't know. This seems like a game. Like if it was on a bigger slate, I'd almost have no interest. Just because I don't like stacking a road team going into Vegas. I also don't like stacking against the Stars or Jake Ottinger, really. They've been pretty good. It's barely a 6 total. There are some really big totals on this slate. If anything, maybe I would go to that Eichel line or the Sagan line. Those are the 2 lines I'd probably play in MME. But in terms of 1 to 3, it's hard to prioritize them on this slate.
Yeah, kind of agree there. We will have to see what Vegas kind of cooks up for their lines. It surprised me the other night to see Michael Amadio just get moved down to the 3rd line. I know they moved the lines around, after the Stone injury. That's kind of the other problem with Vegas is if this is a close game, if it's 1-1 in the middle of the 2nd period, do they shuffle lines again? That's something that they've done a fair bit since these injuries started cropping up here over the last few weeks. First Eichel, now Stone. Marchessault, I think, was out for a couple games. So, all that moving and shifting it means changing lines between games, but it also means changing lines during games sometimes. And that can be kind of frustrating. If we do get a top line of Eichel, Stevenson, and Amadio, there really isn't a lot of ownership coming in on them. I just glancing at the top stacks, they're coming in about 3 to 4% over on DraftKings. That seems pretty reasonable. You're going to get 2 out of those 3 guys on the top power play unit. But here's the thing: is there are obviously Jack Eichel is an elite offensive player in the NHL, but generally for players to kind of take that next step, they need that other, if not elite, then really, really good player beside them. You just think of Toronto with either, Marner or Nylander alongside Austin Matthews. And you think of, Bergeron, Marchand in Tampa Bay or in Boston. And in Tampa Bay, you think of Kucherov and Point. Sometimes they even move Stamkos up just to make it a 3-man unit. Just look at the other side of this game with Hintz and Robertson and Pavelski. One guy can carry a line to respectability, but you need at least 2 to really kind of make them a dominant force. And that's where Mark Stone's injury kind of comes into play. There's a guy on Twitter. I shouldn't just call him a guy. He's actually a pretty knowledgeable hockey person. His name's Corey Snager. He manually tracks hundreds of games across the league every year. He watches the game and, marks down in Excel exactly everything that happens, everything from a cross-ice pass to which guy dumped it in, to which players are in on a certain passing play, et cetera, et cetera. What he tracks are scoring chance contributions at 5-on-5. One of the things he tracks, and that's just players' individual scoring chances plus the assists he gives on teammate scoring chances. Last I checked, which was, I think, last Tuesday or Wednesday, Mark Stone was 11th in the league. Honestly, amongst the super elite players, right up there with, your Jack Hughes, your Evgeny Malkins, your, those types of players. Removing him from Jack Eichel's line, from the power play, from this team entirely, that's a pretty sizable loss to that lineup, not just defensively, because obviously he's still really good in his own end and penalty killing and all that, but offensively, he's just been a marvel for them in the offensive zone this season. And as good as Eichel is, I have said it many times, I'm a fan of Amadio. It was nice to see him really get a chance with Vegas this year. I think Stevenson's an underrated two-way player, but certainly neither of them are anywhere close to what Mark Stone can do. And it's how well do they come together without such a tremendous offensive force on that line. I think there should be some doubts as to how good they can actually be. And then you talk about the Dallas matchup. They'll probably match up against the Dallas top line. Even with Tyler Seguin there, they've been pretty good defensively, which you should probably expect because they do play a fair bit, obviously, with Miro Heiskanen. And Heiskanen's arguably the best defensive defenseman in the league. If not, he's amongst the top 3 or 4. So it's a pretty tough matchup at 5-on-5. I think when you factor in how important Mark Stone is to that line, and what's that impact going to be on the power play? Obviously, we don't have much of a sample without Stone there. He's been healthy the entire year until recently. So, because of the ownership we have on them, I don't really have a problem with playing that Vegas top line or even the Vegas second line, really. The Vegas top line, I think the worry is obviously the loss of Mark Stone. I don't think it can be overstated just how sizable of an impact he leaves behind. There's nobody on that team that can fill what he does. And as good as someone like Jonathan Marchessault is, he cannot replace Mark Stone. And so we dip down to the second line, Marchessault, Smith, and Carlson, assuming they're together.
I think Carlson's out, isn't he? Or did I miss something?
I haven't seen anything.
I'll look while you're talking.
Assuming that they're still together, their problem basically for like 3 or 4 years now has just been shooting percentage. Shooting 3.3% since December 1st as a line. That's not obviously really bad, but around 7% is about normal. So them scoring 1 goal per 60 minutes, even if you triple their shooting percentage, which would be really, really high for them, up around 10%, you're still only at 3 goals per 60 minutes. It's not a lot. So I don't mind that Vegas second line, even despite the shooting percentage problems, for this reason, is that Dallas second line with Ty Dellandrea there, it makes them pretty good offensively. 3.1 expected goals for with Dellandrea and Johnson skating alongside Jamie Benn. But 5.1 actual goals, really, really good. Obviously shooting a bit high, that's going to come down. But 2.8 expected goals against per 60, 3.3 actual goals against. Those are well below average defensive numbers. That's the matchup that Marchessault, I think, is going to be going into. That line has a pretty good 5-on-5 matchup. You're probably going to get 2 out of the 3 players on the top power play unit. We'll see exactly how they decide to split the power plays, but we have seen Smith Marchessault jump to the top power play unit. Dallas does take their fair share of penalties. They're at 3.5 times shorthanded per game. League average is around 3.2, so they're above average or below average, depending how you look at it in that regard. So I think Vegas 2 is just fine. They're coming in with about 5% ownership. They're actually coming in with a higher top 2 stack probability than the top line as well. I think that speaks to the impact of Mark Stone's loss and, how good this Vegas second line can be if they're actually finishing their chances. So of everything Vegas has to offer, I like the second line the best here. I think they make a nice filler, not a filler type stack, but one of those mid-price type stacks that you can use. I mean, they fit with just basically about anybody here tonight, depending what you do. There are some super expensive Ottawa players where they might not fit. There are some super expensive, Pittsburgh stacks that you might be able to make where they might not fit, but they will fit with generally just about anything. So I do like Vegas too here. On the Dallas side, it should be noted, speaking of players playing extremely well together, obviously Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson play really well together, but I think that kind of takes away from what Joe Pavelski can offer. Like he's like 37 years old and he's still a pretty good two-way player. So you still have Pavelski and Robertson who could play well together, and they have Seguin in there. They've been really, really good together in a small sample, 4 expected goals for and about a little over 55 minutes together, 5.1 actual goals for. If you look at the expected goals for and goals for rates for the top line without Roope Hintz over the years, what they're doing with Seguin there is about what they typically do anyway. And it's because they still have 2 out of the 3 guys there. Seguin's not bad. He's certainly not the guy he was 5 years ago, but he's not awful. So I think that they can carry him, and it might be not necessarily a super tough matchup going up against the Eichel line. Obviously, losing Mark Stone should hurt them defensively. That Dallas top line's coming in with pretty good leverage. Our top stacks tool has them with the second most leverage on the night on DraftKings. Less so on FanDuel because I think they are a little bit cheaper, but the leverage remains regardless on both sides. So I do like the Dallas top line here as kind of a leverage play. We talked on the last show how Vegas goaltending hasn't been great. So Vegas 2, Dallas 1 for me. If you had to ask me to pick one, factoring in cost and ownership and all that, I would probably just lean to the Vegas 2 and the home team. But I think they're both in play, and I think they're both usable regardless of the tournament that you're in. I don't see a lot of ownership coming to this game.
Yeah. And if you're playing 1 to 3 lineups, it's not like a thing, I would say, but it's, for me, it's a little bit mental. It's a mental thing, clicking in players from the early game on a shorter slate. You don't want to be dead right away. You know what I mean? So I don't know, if you're on a meeting, it doesn't really matter. But if you're playing one lineup, you don't want to be heavily exposed to the first game and be low scoring, and then you're just dead the rest of the night. So I honestly think it's going to come lower owned than it should be. So yeah, if you like either of those 2 teams, you can play them. And I went and looked. Carlson is in. I don't know where I heard that from. Maybe it was someone else. But anyway, let's move on to the next game. The Anaheim Ducks with a 2.4 total heading into Pittsburgh. The Penguins have a 4 total. John Gibson, Casey DeSmith are confirmed. This is an interesting one. You dropped a nugget on the Zegras-Strome-Vetrano line in Discord. I'll let you talk about that. Penguins don't really hard match at home, so the top 6, we'll see a bunch of the top 6. The facing off against the Zegras-Strome-Vetrano line will be very advantageous for the Penguins here. They have a very good power play spot. Ownership reflects that spot. The projections reflect that spot. The total reflects that spot. So, yeah, I think, all things considered, Pittsburgh is my favorite spot of the night. There is high ownership. There's almost no ownership here on the Ducks tonight. Casey DeSmith is in net. So if you're playing a bunch of lineups, maybe you can get a little sneaky and try to get in some Ducks.
Yeah, I think high ownership is kind of underselling what we might see here. Top stacks tool for DraftKings has the Pittsburgh top line coming in at 32%. I think in some single entry and 3 max contests and stuff like that, you can see it higher, especially the power play guys, especially just Crosby and Gensel. Even on a 6-game slate, I think there are some contests where you can see that top line at 40%. It's huge. If you add up their entire ownership, or their entire top 2 stack probability, I'm going to have a tough time spitting that out. I think they're at between the first, second, and third lines. They're at 55%. And I think that's something we should probably, maybe you have the day off today and you just want to check out some NHL DFS for tonight or something like that. Maybe you're new, but just because this team has a massive home total doesn't mean they're guaranteed to win or they're guaranteed to smash or anything like that. Like I said, we have about 55% top 2 stack probability between adding up the first, second, and third Pittsburgh lines. That means nearly half the time these lines aren't going to be in the top 2 stacks, right? I think people kind of, we had a question in Discord about that, about being newer to NHL DFS and things to look for, what not to look for, and stuff like that. And what I said is that it's pretty comparable to MLB in that sense. You could have a great hitter again in a matchup against a terrible pitcher, and then that great hitter goes, 1 for 3 with a double. It's still a decent day overall, but it's a terrible day in that spot. And you can see things like Pittsburgh. Maybe Pittsburgh gets out to a quick 3-0 lead, couple goals from the top line. Then all of a sudden, Sidney Crosby plays 14 minutes tonight, right? Because it's the Anaheim Ducks. I mean, I think Connor McDavid played like 15 minutes against them when they beat Anaheim there 7-1 or whatever it was, or 6-1 last weekend. So that is one of the concerns here. Don't think just because this is a really bad team playing a good team on the road that, it's a guarantee or a lock. It's likely. It's, doesn't mean it's anything close to a guarantee, but that Pittsburgh top line has been humming. 3.5 expected goals for, 2.3 against since December 1st with Brian Rust on the top line. They've been playing extremely well. Jake Gensel's been starting to shoot a little bit more. He's got 19 shots in his last 5 games. His shooting has really been up and down this season, so it's nice to hopefully catch him on the upswing. The Pittsburgh second line hasn't been playing as well, and I think was it Winnipeg the other night when the Winnipeg second line absolutely went off. A lot of that matchup was against this Evgeny Malkin line.
Yeah.
So you might want to say, hey, let's go play some Anaheim too. Maybe we can get a second line that's cheap that might be able to take advantage of a decent 5-on-5 matchup. Here's the thing, as Josh alluded to, that Anaheim second line, they're up to about 60 minutes together of Zegras, Vetrano, and Ryan Strome. 5.9 expected goals against per 60 minutes, 7.4 actual goals against. That's basically an average penalty kill. Like, I'm serious.
Yeah.
When that Anaheim second line is on the ice, it's an average penalty kill defensively anyway. And again, only 60 minutes, but Vetrano and Strome have like abysmal defensive numbers so far this season. Trevor Zegras isn't going to turn that around. It's not going to stay at like 5.9 expected goals against, but it could stay over 4, which would, I still think, be worse than the league. So it's not like it's a great matchup for that Anaheim second line anyway. So Anaheim 2 would not be the line I would go to. It would be Terry, McTavish, and Henry. At least they're generating something offensively. 2.7 expected goals for in their 60 minutes together. It's a little bit better than league average. If you're stacking Anaheim Ducks, the best you can ask for is a little bit better than league average. So I don't know if I would get to Anaheim in single entry or a single entry or something like that. I think there are other spots you can go with that price range. Other low-owned spots you can go with that price range. We'll talk about some a little bit later, but like the Calgary top line for one, you know what I mean? So we'll talk about those a little bit later, but it's not the Anaheim second line I would go to. It's the Anaheim top line. But really, this is all about Pittsburgh. And you got to figure out if you want to play them or fade them. Like, this isn't one of those games, I don't think, where I like one-off Jake Gensel or something like that. Like, if I put in Jake Gensel, I'm putting in the entire line. If I put in Evgeny Malkin, I'm putting in the entire line. Power play stack them. Go with all 5 guys on the top power play unit. Maybe even Josh stack them. Put 6 Pittsburgh players, if you're playing on DraftKings, in your lineup. There's no defensive matchup whatsoever to worry about at Anaheim. 5-on-5, penalty kill, what have you. The only way Pittsburgh loses this game is if they come out and have a bad game. And we have seen teams do that against Anaheim. So, like I said, this is, the furthest thing from a guarantee or a sure thing. We just saw Anaheim shut out Dallas like a week ago or so, right? So we've seen it happen. It's just not very likely. So I think it's just figuring out exactly what kind of Pittsburgh stack you want. All things equal, I will take the top line because they have been playing better of late, but there's no issue playing literally any stack in Pittsburgh.
Yeah. And to further your point about the top stack percentage, we've had this question a few times in our Discord. If you add up all the top stack percentages, it goes over 100. So it doesn't add up to 100. Each line has a statistical probability from 1 to 100% of being a top 2 stack. So if you adding up, it's like, hey, it's coming to 238. Something's wrong here. No, Pittsburgh 1 has between a 1 and 100% chance of being a top 2 stack. Pittsburgh 2 has between a 1 and 100%. So it's not going to add up to 100. Each line gets simulated thousands of times, whatever it is, and that's what the number that spits out. Also, if you're looking for a reason to fade Pittsburgh, they looked awful against Winnipeg. Winnipeg 2 ran over the Malkin line. Jake Gensel had 1 shot on goal in that game. Winnipeg's surprisingly a very good team this year, considering some of their.
I mean, Pittsburgh's still missing their top two defensemen, right? Like Letang and Petrie aren't playing. Dumoulin's been terrible this entire year. Pettersson looks like he's probably going to be back. Like they've had to play Ty Smith like 23 minutes, and this was a guy that couldn't crack the roster at the start of the year. They do have issues on the blue line.
And he was cut by the Devils.
Traded,
pretty much. I mean, if they couldn't,
they wanted to get rid of him and get something a bit more secure yet.
But yeah, if you're looking for a lower owned like Pittsburgh type deal, I think and you don't want to full stack the power play, which I think is a way to get different. Pittsburgh 2, you full stack because I think Jason Zucker of all the top 6 will be the lowest owned. So if you want a different combo, just get Zucker in there. And I think that's fine on the 6-game slate. This is a very good power play spot, but this is a very, very good 5-on-5 matchup as well. Let's move on to the next one. The New York Rangers with a 3.7 total heading into Columbus. The Blue Jackets have a 2.8 total. Yaroslav Halak and Elvis Merzlikins are confirmed. Rangers going back-to-back on the road. They lost at home to the Canadiens last night. They looked awful. They were in their Liberty jerseys, and it was Sunday. We should have all seen it coming. But they're back. Kreider's still out. Don't really know the lines. I know Vitaly Kravtsov moved down in the middle of the game yesterday. He flipped spots with Jimmy Vesey, so that's something to keep in mind. During warm-ups, Vesey may be up with Panarin and Trocheck. We'll have to see. Zibanejad, Kakko, and Lafreniere stayed together. Philip Hedl and Barclay Goodrow stayed together. Fun times had there. Columbus going with Goodrow, Roslovic, Laine, Nyquist, Jenner, and Eric Robinson. Fun times there. Kirill Marchenko on the top power play. He is 3,400. If the Rangers struggle anywhere, really, it is on the penalty kill. Now, Halak is an Igor. He hasn't been awful, but he hasn't been great. Rangers back-to-back on the road. The problem is the Blue Jackets are bad, right? If Jenner was between Laine and Gaudreau, I would have serious thoughts about playing that line, but Jack Roslovic is a massive step down. So if you want to put in a Boone Jenner with Laine and Gaudreau and hope that maybe in the first period, Brad Larson is maybe I should put, I don't know, Boone Jenner with Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine. That's a brilliant idea. And they're aligned together. I don't mind that. On the Rangers side, it would be some sort of power play stack. But again, they're getting very heavy ownership. And Columbus doesn't take a ton of penalties. And if I'm going to play Artemi Panarin for 25%, I'd rather just play Sidney Crosby for 35%. You know what I mean? So
yeah. No, I know what you're getting at, and we'll see what the Rangers decide to do with their lines. Because at this point, you and I have been saying pretty much all season, give Vitaly Kravtsov a chance in that top 6. He's been given his chance. They're up to 115 minutes, Trocheck, Panarin, and Kravtsov together, and they just really haven't done much. 2.1 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 2.3 against, 2.1 actual goals for, playing to a really slow pace. One of the barometers I use for a high-paced line is being at about 120 shot attempts for and against per 60 minutes. This particular iteration with Vitaly Kravtsov there is at about 105 for and against, whereas when you have any other winger besides Kravtsov, they're over 120. So he's playing well defensively, I think, which you have to give him some credit for because that helps the team in the real world, but it certainly doesn't help us a whole lot in the DFS community if you're generating a half goal less than the league average every 60 minutes. So they're not really playing that well. On the flip side, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets, right? If there are a half dozen, get right spots in the NHL, Columbus is certainly one of them. And especially where they broke up Jenner in that top line. I don't think the Panarin line sees much of Boone Jenner. I think Jenner is going to be used kind of in a shutdown role, being sent out against Zibanejad and Lafreniere. Here's the issue. Jenner has about 70 minutes played this year without Gaudreau or Laine on his wings. 1.7 expected goals for, 2.5 expected goals against. They're getting just absolutely decimated when they're on the ice together. By expected goal share, you're looking at about 40%, which is like, that's Chicago, right? Like, that's just absolutely terrible. And then the second line doesn't have a huge sample together. 55 minutes, 2.8 expected goals for, 2.5 expected goals against. I think Gaudreau and Laine have shown they play fairly well together this year. So I don't even know if it's a particularly good matchup for Trocheck, Panarin, and Kravtsov at even strength, because they are going to see Gaudreau and Laine and Roslovic, and I don't have a ton of faith in that Columbus line. But at least they have a sample of playing well together without Boone Jenner. So if anything on the Rangers, I would probably go to the top line here. I know they're probably going to carry a lot of ownership. Like, both first and second lines are going to carry a lot of ownership for the Rangers here. It's a function of price, and it's a function of them having a 3.7 total on the road because of who they're playing. But I think that Rangers top line with Lafreniere there is in a much better matchup at 5-on-5 now. They haven't really been generating a ton. 2.3 expected goals for, but 4.1 actual goals, shooting under 12%. Like, the shooting percentage isn't extreme because they are landing their shots on goal. Lafreniere, his last 3 games, 18 minutes, 21 minutes, 18 minutes. Problem is he only has 3 shots in those games. Like, that's another thing. Like, it's like, give Lafreniere in the chance on the top 6 with power play minutes, and then he gets, on average nearly 20 minutes for 3 games and puts up 3 total shots. Like,
gotta shoot to score, my friend.
Yeah. Please put something on net here, Laffy. We're dying out here.
Friend.
So with Lafreniere on the top power play with Zibanejad, I would probably just go to Kakko, Zibanejad, and Lafreniere as my 3-man stack. They are going to be highly owned, though. So, you're going to want to mix up something with your other stack or with your defenseman or what have you. But I do think they're in the better matchup going against Boone Jenner, against Nyquist and Robinson. Like, that's not a matchup that I'm particularly worried about. Columbus doesn't take a ton of penalties. You're right. They're at about league average, but their penalty kill has been starting to slip. Like, that was the one thing that was saving them from embarrassing loss after embarrassing loss, was the penalty kill. Even that started to slip over the last month or so. So it's not a terrible power play spot for the Rangers. There is a fair bit of ownership, as Zibanejad, Kakko, and Lafreniere, I think, have a really good matchup at even strength and just fine on the power play. So that's where I would go on the Rangers side. On the Columbus side, I think it would have to be the second line. Like, I just don't know how I get to a Boone Jenner, Gus Nyquist, Eric Robinson stack on a 6-game, even on a short-ish 6-game slate. One-offing Boone Jenner, I think, is just fine because, like you said, maybe he gets moved back to his original line. He's still in the top power play unit, all that good stuff. But it's the Columbus second line that I would want, again, going up against what's been a Rangers second line that's below average or below 50% by expected goal share. But, oh, man, this just feels like a really bad game because I think we could see some lineup changes coming pretty quickly in this one if things don't go either way for either team. So I'm going to say outright, I'm not super excited to stack anything on either side here. If anything, it'd be the Rangers top line or that Johnny Gaudreau line from Columbus.
Yep, I agree there. Before we move on, we have a $4.69 super chat from Big Turk. Thank you, Turk. He says, thoughts on John Gaudreau over 2.5 shots on goal. Can I refer you to oddshopper.com, where you can use player compare tools and see the best bets. If they have a nice ROI on Johnny Gaudreau over, you bet the over. In all seriousness, I would bet the over here. He has over 3 shots in 3 of his last 4 games since Laine has returned. I think he's good for at least 3 here.
I'm not going to argue. Okay. I mean, I'm just, I'm not a super big fan of Columbus today, but I see that Turk is. Congrats, Turk. Hope Johnny Gaudreau gets you there.
Yes. If you are interested in sports betting and you like Stokastic plus Platinum, we can get you up to $1,000 bet with first bet insurance up to $1,000, and you can get 2 free months of Stokastic plus Platinum for free. All you got to do, click the link in the description below, follow the instructions, or you can use promo code Platinum Sub, but it's easier to click the link in the description below, follow the instructions. You need a Stokastic membership, which is free to make if you don't have one. You need a BetMGM account. This is for new users only, up to $1,000 risk-free bet, depending on your tolerance. And remember, the legal age for gambling in most states is 21 or older. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Let's move on to the next one. We have a Washington Capitals team going into New York. That sucks. The Islanders have a 2.7 total. Darcy Kemper, Ilya Sorokin confirmed new lines for the Capitals. Alex Ovechkin is with Connor Sheary and Dylan Strome. Evgeny Kuznetsov is with Anthony Mantha and TJ Oshie. Nicholas Backstrom is with Sonny Milano and Tom Wilson. Islanders lines Lee and Nelson are with Simone Holmstrom. Matthew Barzal is with Josh Bailey and Zach Parisi. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Lipstick on a pig. You can just keep going with the acronyms there. This game is a 5.5 total. If I had to get to anything here, it would be the Capital side, but I don't really like stacking against Sorokin at home. The Islanders lines right now are just an absolute abomination. I'm not interested in them at all. And they're a bit overpriced. You know what I mean? Matt Barzal, 6,100. Anders Lee, 5,900. Brock Nelson, 6,300. It's not like we're getting a discount on them in a 2.7 total. So of all the 6 games, this might be my least favorite for stacking.
Kind of torn on what to do here. Because here's the thing is normally when the Islanders are fairly cheap at home, you'll see unreasonable ownership on them, particularly on the Nelson and Lee line, because those are the 2 of the 3 guys on the top power play unit, but there's no ownership coming in on them. Top Stacks tool has the Nelson Lee line at 1.9%. The Barzal, Parisi, Bailey line at 1.7%. There's no ownership coming in on the Islanders, which it makes sense, right? Like you said, 2.7 total, 5.5 game total at home. The Islanders at 2.7. I think it's the second lowest total on the slate behind Anaheim. So, it makes sense that there's no ownership coming in on them. But here's the thing. I'm not a big fan of Simon Holmstrom. In fact, I had to laugh when I saw a tweet from someone. I was just checking for lineups. By the way, Dallas Vegas just hit the ice for warm-ups. Ottinger and Thompson are starting. Someone said Simon Holmstrom was in a goal drought. The guy has 1 career goal. Come on, what are we doing? Anyways, when Lee and Nelson are playing with anyone but Bailey and Beauvillier on their wing, 3 expected goals for, 2.8 against, 3.8 actual goals for. They're pretty good offensively. Now, the Caps have been a lot better defensively, especially after the first month of the season. And I think the worry here might be some of the matchups, right? Because they have been using the Jean-Gabriel Pajot line, the Islanders have, as kind of like a shutdown line. So I think he might be going out against Ovechkin and Strome. That would leave the Nelson and Lee line to go out against Kuznetsov and Mantha. And Kuznetsov and Mantha have actually been pretty good together this year defensively. 1.9 expected goals against per 60 minutes. Here's the wrinkle, is that we were talking about TJ Oshie in the Discord earlier today. TJ Oshie's having a really bad season. I know he's been in and out of the lineup with injury, and he's also getting old. He's nearly my age, which feels bad
for hockey.
Yeah, it feels bad, man.
Telling me.
He only has 14 points in 28 games. He's on pace for a 40-point season. His expected goals impacts by the advanced stats website, Evolving Hockey, are the second worst of any Caps forward this season. Whether it's age, whether it's injury, whether it's a combination of both, which I think would be more likely, Oshie's just been bad this year. So as good as Kuznetsov and Mantha have been, can they carry him and carry that line to respectability? I think that's an open question, and that would be what would kind of make me lean towards Lee and Nelson. is that, like I said, that line has been good offensively as long as they don't have Bailey or Beauvillier, especially Bailey, on their wing. I don't think Holmstrom's anything special, but he doesn't have to be. He just has to not suck. Like that's just that's the key to everything here, man. Just don't suck. So I don't actually hate the Lee Nelson Holmstrom line. I think you can leave Holmstrom off. It's not necessary to use him. Like I said, he has 1 goal. It's 17 games this season. He has 11 shots in 17 games this season, 4 shots in his last 5 games. Like he's just not doing anything. So I think you can leave him off, but I think Lee and Nelson at the very least make a pretty reasonable 2-man against what might be, not what is, we don't know that yet, but what might be a poor second line from the Washington Capitals. So it'd be Nelson and Lee that I'm looking at on the Islanders side. Like if you want to go to the Barzal line, like Barzal and Parise have actually played reasonably well together this year. I just worry about, not on the power play together. There's no power play correlation for one. The other is just players getting moved around, right? So I do think there are concerns with the Islander lineup. They've been moving around guys a lot over the last month or so, just regardless of which lines they're on. But especially that top line with Parise or with Barzal playing with 2 wingers that he hasn't played a ton with together at the same time in Bailey and Parise. So, I don't really have a lot on. I don't really like the Barzal line. I think it's Nelson and Lee. I'm not dipping all the way down to the Pajot line, though. If you want to one-off Pajot, I think that's fine because he usually plays a hefty number of minutes. He's shut down, power play, penalty kill, all that stuff. He's, quote, on the 3rd line, but there are some games where he's, 2nd or 3rd amongst ice time amongst their forwards. So don't mind Pajot one-off, but it's Nelson and Lee. On the Washington side, Ovechkin, it was weird that they broke up and healthy scratch Dylan Strome from Ovechkin because him and Sheary and Ovechkin, their problem for basically like the first 2.5 months of the season was just finishing. They had really good expected goals for numbers. They were controlling the play pretty well, pretty good goals against numbers as well. They just had trouble finishing. And then they actually started finishing. Over the last 5 weeks, going back to about the middle of December, 3.6 expected goals for, just kind of continue what they've been doing all year offensively, but 4 actual goals per 60 minutes. They started scoring, and then they got broke up, and then Strome was a healthy scratch. I get it. Coaches have to try different things, especially when your players are getting healthy. But this line has been good, generally speaking, for Washington all year. The only problem was finishing. They started finishing before they were broke up. Now they're back together, but it's going into New York to face the Islanders. The Islanders are only at 3 times shorthanded per game with a very good penalty kill. Ilya Sorokin, obviously in net. That's another big check in the Islanders' favor. Ovechkin's always in play as a one-off. We always say that. It doesn't matter to the matchup. It doesn't matter who he's playing against. It's just whether you want to stack the entire line with him. With Strome probably on the second power play unit, it's tough to stack them, but I honestly don't hate the idea of, especially if you're playing like 20 lineups. Like that Strome, Sheary, Ovechkin line's coming in with under 2% ownership here tonight. That's a line with Alex Ovechkin on it on his 6-game slate coming in under 2%. I don't know. I don't think I would play them because I'm worried about the power play correlation and I'm only playing single entry. But if I had 20 lineups or something like that, I would probably have at least 1, if not 2, Washington stacks. Sorokin's been playing well, but we have seen him play poorly this year. You can't rely on elite goaltending every night. So Washington top line, Islanders, the Brock Nelson line, I should say, but it's a Brock Nelson line that I like the best in this game, though, like Josh, if you don't want to play anything here, I can't really blame you for it.
Yeah, the Washington total dropped from 2.8 to 2.7 while you're talking. Also, quick update on the Vegas lines. Smith, Carlson, and Marchessault are together, but Eichel is with your boy Paul Cotter and Nick Roy. Enjoy that if you are stacking Vegas. That is probably the worst possible thing possible. Amadio is with Stevenson and Uncle Hot Dog Phil Kessel. Not the worst line in the world, but put 2 of those guys with Eichel.
I was just going to say, like, if they had Roy instead of Kessel there, I'd be like, that might be their best line.
Yeah.
I think it says something about how they construed their top 6.
Yeah. Good times. Let's move on to the next one. The Ottawa.
Before we do, real quick, I just want to jump in about those new lines. Like, if you're playing this slate, that information just came out a few minutes ago, which means most DFS players will have 20 minutes to react to it at all. Nobody's going to have, or very few people are going to have, that exact Vegas top line, right? Eichel, Roy, and Cotter. I'm not saying you have to go out and play them, but if you have 100 lineups tonight, it would probably behoove you to have like one or two of them be that exact Vegas top line, because it's going to be a very, very low owned combination.
Yeah, I don't mind Roy up there with Eichel. It's Cotter that I have issue with.
Right? Like, it was like, maybe they move up Nick Roy, maybe they move up Carrier, and it was like, sorry, somebody else has got to get the boot that probably shouldn't, but let Vegas do what they want to do. Hopefully Dallas just blows them out of the water here.
Find out shortly. Ottawa Senators with a 3.3 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 3.2 total. Cam Talbot probable. Jordan Binnington confirmed. New lines for the Senators. Tim Stützle is with Brady Tkachuk and Drake Batherson. Shane Pinto is with Claude Giroux and Alex DeBrincat. Basically, DeBrincat and Batherson flip-flopped from their last game. Blues going back status quo. This game feels like important. Both teams not very good defensively. Both teams iffy on the penalty kill. Senators very power play reliant. Blues don't take a ton of penalties though, but when they do, it's a mess. A lot of ownership on this Blues team here, even on that Barbashev, Saad, Shen line, which has been chalky for the past few weeks just because they're cheap and they get minutes. Top line for the Senators, fully correlated. Top line for the Blues, fully correlated. I like both top lines here.
Here we go again. Ottawa Senators are coming in with extremely good leverage.
Kill me.
I feel like I say that at least once a week. I don't think they've come through for me yet this season.
Me either.
That Tkachuk, Stützle, Batherson is a new combination like of late, but they did play together earlier this year, and there is a reasonable sample with Tkachuk, Stützle, and Batherson together. We're talking 145 minutes. 3.7 expected goals for, 2.5 expected goals against per 60 minutes. That is really, really dominant hockey, flat out. And they're even scoring 3.2 actual goals per 60 minutes, shooting just over 8%. That's a pretty good line. That's finally, well, not finally. I guess when DeBrincat was there, it's perfectly correlated. But when Giroux was there, it's not. That is perfectly correlated on the power play. But as you mentioned, St. Louis doesn't really take a ton of penalties. They're the least penalized team in the league, coming in at 2.4 times shorthanded per game. Like I said earlier, the league average sitting at about 3.2, so 25% less than the league average. That's quite a sizable gap. So, Ottawa, even though Ottawa does draw a lot of power plays, I think they're first in the league now still in power play opportunities per game. Do they actually draw a lot against this Blues team? I think that's a pretty fair question. St. Louis's penalty kill is still struggling at times. The goaltending has gotten better on the PK. I think that's something that saved them. It's at 867 over the last 6 weeks, which doesn't sound good on the penalty kill, but it's a lot better than what St. Louis had in the 6 weeks before that. So without a ton of penalties, does Ottawa have the opportunity to get there tonight? The top line, I mean. I think they can. St. Louis is probably going to use that Robert Thomas line in a shutdown role. Since Ryan O'Reilly left the lineup, they played over 75 minutes together, which is about 6 games or so. Not a lot, but starting to get to a sample we can work with. 1.7 expected goals for, 2.5 against, 2.3 actual goals for, 3.1 against. Like, they're getting run over on a pretty regular basis. And this Ottawa top line runs people over. So it seems like a pretty good matchup for the Ottawa top line. They are really expensive, though. I think that's what's keeping a lot of ownership off of them, right? They're $21,700. That's over $2,000 more than the Pittsburgh top line, which is why I think you're seeing this line at 3.5%, where Pittsburgh is going to be 30 to 40, maybe over 40 in some contests. So I really, really do like this Ottawa top line, this 5-on-5 matchup. I don't know if it's a great power play matchup, and that's the problem here. Is Ottawa has been so reliant on the power play. It's like, do they generate enough to pay off nearly $22K in salary if they don't get a power play goal here tonight? It seems kind of tough to pull that off. But just the ownership alone, like I said, 3.5% ownership. It is because they're the most expensive line. But they're coming in, with less ownership than the Boone Jenner line from Columbus. Obviously, that's a price thing, but I just kind of want to put into context just how few people are going to be playing what is a really good top line for Ottawa. I do like the Ottawa top line. I don't think it's a good power play matchup for them. So if you want to stay away from them for that reason, I get that. For the ownership reason, like this Ottawa line has the second highest top 2 probability of any line on the slate by our top stacks tool of being a top 2 stack. And they're coming in with, I don't know, the 15th highest ownership or something like that. It seems like a pretty good leverage spot for Ottawa 1, but if you don't want to play them because they might not get their power play opportunities, I certainly get it. Ottawa 2 is a little bit more interesting. They are coming in with I shouldn't say a fair bit of ownership, coming in under 5%, which is still good leverage. Giroux and Pinto had played reasonably well together. 3 expected goals for, 2.8 against. The problem is they're shooting under 3.5% when they're on together. But they are going to go up against that St. Louis second line. And that St. Louis second line, since O'Reilly's been hurt, has been just really bad defensively. 3.4 expected goals against per minute, 60 minutes, 3.9 actual goals against. If you don't want to spend $21K plus for the Ottawa top line in a bad power play matchup, I think the play is going into DeBrincat, Giroux, and Pinto. I think you can leave off Pinto if you want. He hasn't really done much for like 2 months now. You can run off DeBrincat if you want, but I think that Ottawa second line would be the line that I would pick just because it's not a really good power play matchup. On the St. Louis side, I think there's just too much ownership. It's just that simple. Neither line's playing that well. These Ottawa lines are good. The top line certainly really good. Second line, I don't know. Yeah, but second line, I don't know. But they're coming in way too highly owned. I think the Shen line especially. I think the Shen line you can just kind of ignore because of their ownership. I would just rather just flip over and go play that Ottawa second line as a mid-price stack here.
Yeah. A top Ottawa line at that ownership is very enticing. If you could tell me that the Blues are going to take 5 penalties tonight, I'd definitely play them. But
even at 3 penalties, yeah. I would say maybe, but there's a good chance Ottawa gets 1 or none. You know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know.
As we mentioned off the top, we are sponsored by Prize Picks. Thank you very much, Prize Picks. And you can click the link in the description below to get 1 free month Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit with Prize Picks. It's a daily prop-based contest. You don't have to worry about sharks like Emac or Jake stealing all your money with their shark prowess. There's no optimizers. There's no mass entries. Good thing there's no optimizers since I don't know how to copy and paste. A 5-player lineup can net you up to 10 extra entry fee. You can go cross sports. You can use your NFL knowledge with NHL, with NBA, with UFC, whole bunch of all that good stuff. So if you're in a legal state where sports betting is not legal either, there are some states out there that don't have legal sports betting where Prize Picks is legal. It is basically like doing parlays. So click the link in the description below. Get your 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and your $100 deposit match bonus. Let's get to the last game of the night, an 8 p.m. start here. The Calgary Flames with a 3.2 total heading into Nashville. The Predators have a 2.8 total. Jacob Markstrom, UC Saros confirmed. Your guess is as good as mine for the Predators lines. If Forsberg and Duchesne are together, there will be some interest. This game is more about the Flames and their low ownership. Now, couple things. Flames top line of Lindholm, Toffoli, Dubé coming in very low owned. They're very moderately priced. It's reflected in there's 3 lines that play between 13 and 19 minutes. Almost all their top 9 forwards play between 13 and 17, 18 minutes. You're not going to see these guys playing 20, 21 minutes. Now, this is a very good power play spot, and since Dylan Dubé has gone up to that top line, they have been very good. So at that ownership percentage, I do really like the Flames top line here.
Yeah, I think the Flames just have 3 playable lines here tonight. That's something that we mentioned in Discord. They do have 3 playable lines. That's why you're not seeing a ton of ownership on any one of them. They're all relatively in the same price range too. Like they're all within $4,000 of each other on DraftKings, which is basically like, do you want to go for an upscale defenseman or a low scale defenseman? That's basically all the only difference here. The Calgary top line, I was looking at, I like to keep track of how lines do after like the first 4 or 5 games, their initial burst. The Calgary top line since Christmas, 2.8 expected goals for per 60 minutes, 2.5 actual goals for. Elias Lindholm, 18 shots in his last 10 games. Just not like they're still generating and they're still dominant, but it's more like the LA Kings back in 2014 dominant rather than the Colorado Avalanche in 2022 dominant. So where they're not getting a ton of ice time, like I think they're absolutely playable because of the power play spot, right? Like you said, a good power play spot here. Nashville's penalty kill has been getting better, but still the middle of the league at best over the last 6 weeks. They're still taking way more penalties than the league average, 3.6 times shorthanded per game. It's like 15% higher than the league average. It's quite a bit. A Calgary top power play unit's been pretty good of late. I was looking since Christmas. They're nearly 12 goals per 60 minutes on the power play since the holiday break. So, the power play's been playing pretty well. They might get a lot of opportunities against Nashville here tonight. We've been saying it for like the last 3 or 4 shows. Nashville's just a bad defensive team. That extends to the penalty kill. Not as bad of late, but it's still a pretty good spot for that Calgary top line. Problem is like if they go into Duchesne and Forsberg and Parsonen, like Duchesne and Forsberg have pretty good defensive numbers together this year. Anytime they're not playing with Michael Granlund, they're at 2.3 expected goals against per 60 minutes, which is a lot better than the league average. So it could be a reasonably tough matchup for the Calgary top line. That's kind of what makes me want to lean towards the Calgary second line. Like we can make fun of Milan Lucic playing on the second line all we want, but that line since Christmas, over 100 minutes together, 3 expected goals for per 60 minutes, well above league average, 4.2 actual goals for, obviously well above league average. Kadri has 31 shots in his last 10 games. Like they're playing really well. They're going to get that soft middle of that Nashville lineup, which isn't really all that dangerous. I don't mind Calgary 2 here, especially when we get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. I think you can go all the way down to Calgary 3 as well. Like Calgary 3 might actually be their best line. It's just that none of those guys get on the power play, right? I'm talking about Coleman, Backlund, and Mangiapane. Again, since Christmas, about 100 minutes together, 4.4 expected goals for, 1.3 against. That's just beyond dominant for that Calgary third line. And they're all playing 16 to 18 minutes. Like you said, they are spreading out the ice time, but these guys are all like within like the top 6. You know what I mean? I think it's like Huberdeau and Lucic and Dubé are the guys that are like 13 to 15, maybe a little over 15. But these guys are all playing 16, 18 minutes. Michael Backlund's at 3.2 shots per game this season, 22 shots in his last 5 games. They're going to get even better matchups against the depth from Nashville. I really do like the Calgary third line. So I think there are reasons to play all 3 Calgary lines. There's less ownership on that top line, the Lindholm line. So if you want to go there for less ownership, 2 guys on the power play and all that, like fill your boots. I think it would be either Calgary second or Calgary third lines that I would lean to personally, however. On the Nashville side, no interest. There's 2 guys I want to play in that entire lineup, and they're playing on the same line together, Forsberg and Duchesne. So if you want to play Forsberg, Duchesne, and Parsonen, they don't have that much ownership, 4 to 5% here. They don't have a huge top 2 stack probability either, just over 5%. They're priced in the same range. They're basically the same price as the Calgary top line. The Calgary top line's half the ownership. I'd rather just play Calgary 1.
Same. Coming up after us, NFL Live before lock at 7:15 with Laffy and Neil for the Bucks showdown slate, so make sure to tune in for that. 3 minutes before lock, just real quickly, who are you liking in net tonight?
Well, Jake Ottinger, his game's about to lock. So if you want to play him, I imagine get him in. UC Saros as well. I'll always play UC Saros at a reasonable price at home. And I like both Kemper and Sorokin. I hate liking both goalies in the same game. I would lean Sorokin, just lean to the home goalie, but Kemper's coming in with pretty reasonable ownership, and I don't think it's really that bad of a spot for him. The Islanders are not a dangerous team.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. You want to spend up. I guess Sorokin's kind of spending up to 7,800. I guess Logan Thompson or Casey I see Casey DeSmith 22% projected, like 8,500. Maybe for cash games because the Penguins should win. I think my favorite spend up option in GPPs would be Jacob Markstrom. Let's talk a little bit about defensemen real quick. Who you liking on the blue line?
Yossi and Alex Pietrangelo for the expensive guys, though. I don't think I'm going to be paying up super like a ton on the blue line. It's just not what I think here today. Like Rasmus Anderson, I think if you want to take advantage, if Nashville could take a ton of penalties here tonight, I think Rasmus Anderson makes some sense. For cheap guys, Yanni Hakanpää, he's been playing 21 plus minutes on average of late, and he's only 2,600. I think he makes a lot of sense on DraftKings. Nick Jensen and Scott Mayfield for more mid-price guys. Calle Rosen at 3K. I think he's been playing 19 minutes a game for the Blues. And I think Alex Carrier is a game-time decision. If he's in, I might have a little bit of interest. But if he's not in, they're basically just giving his minutes to the top three. Like, you don't go out and play like Jacob Lozon or something like that. For the super cheap, I think Hakanpää's the guy. And if you want to play him, you have 1 minute to do it.
Yeah. Slate locks in less than a minute. Who you liking for your hat trick pick?
You know who I like? You know who I love? I love the Drake Batherson.
There you go. I got to keep up with my tradition of getting a little spicy. I'm actually going for Mexican food after this. That is not just a coincidence. I actually am. I do that every Monday. And I happen to be in an authentic sombrero.
Yeah, everybody has Taco Monday. That's what it's famously called.
Yeah, it's Taco Monday. I'll take ape tit for 200, Trebek. No, my hat trick pick is going to be Blake Coleman.
That would be something. I would love to see that. Blake Coleman, Drake Batherson, your hat trick picks.
Yep. So for Slim Cliffy, I am Josh Harris. We'll be back tomorrow in our normal 2 p.m. Eastern slot. My head hurts. It's a bit sweaty. I'll be in a different hat. Maybe I'll cut my hair. You don't know. But good luck, everybody. Make sure to, if you want to sign up, click those links in the description. We'll see you in Discord. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck, everyone.